Marcus thought he was just helping strangers escape the rain. Elena and her 4 children had been thrown out by cruel family members who called them burdens. But when the widow's brother-in-law threatened to destroy Marcus's life for helping them, this broken single father discovered something worth fighting for. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more emotional stories. Marcus Williams stood at his kitchen window, watching the rain pour down on the empty street. His small apartment felt too quiet since his wife Sarah had passed away 2 years ago. Their 8-year-old son Tommy was at school, and Marcus was getting ready for another long day at the construction site. At 35, Marcus had learned that life could change in a heartbeat. One day you're planning family vacations, the next you're figuring out how to braid your daughter's hair. Except he only had Tommy, and Tommy needed a father who could be strong. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. When Marcus opened the door, he found a woman around his age standing in the rain with 4 children huddled behind her. She was soaked, shivering, and her eyes held a desperation he recognized from his own mirror during the darkest days after Sarah's funeral. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Elena Rodriguez. I lived 3 houses down. I know we've never really talked, but I didn't know where else to go." Marcus had seen her before, always hurrying past with her children, never making eye contact. He'd heard through neighborhood gossip that she was a widow too, but he'd been too wrapped up in his own grief to reach out. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, opening the door wider as he noticed the children were carrying small bags. "My husband's family threw us out," Elena said, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "They said since Roberto is gone, we have no right to live in his house anymore. They changed the locks this morning while I was taking the kids to school. Everything we own is in there." Behind her, 4 children stood quietly. The oldest, a girl who looked about 15, held the hand of a boy around Tommy's age. Twin girls, maybe 5 years old, clung to each other with wide, frightened eyes. "They can't do that," Marcus said, anger rising in his chest. "That's your home." "The house was in Roberto's name only," Elena explained. "His brother Luis is a lawyer. He found some legal way to take it. He said we're not real family anymore, just burdens. He gave us 1 hour to take what we could carry." Marcus felt his heart break. He thought of Tommy, imagining someone throwing them out of their home, calling his son a burden. Without hesitation he stepped back and opened the door wide. "Come in," he said. "All of you. You're soaking wet." "I can't ask you to," Elena started. "You're not asking. I'm offering. Come inside before you all catch pneumonia." Chapter 2, An Unlikely Family. The children filed in quietly, dripping water on Marcus's worn carpet. Elena introduced them. Sophia, 15, who had Roberto's serious dark eyes, Diego, 8, the same age as Tommy, and the 5-year-old twins Lucia and Carmen, who hadn't spoken since their father's death 6 months ago. Marcus grabbed towels from the bathroom and helped get everyone dry. When Tommy came home from school, he found a house full of people and reacted the way any 8-year-old would, with excitement. "Dad, are we having a party?" Tommy asked, his backpack hitting the floor with a thud. "These are our neighbors," Marcus explained. "They're going to stay with us for a while." That first night, Marcus gave up his bedroom to Elena and the girls. Sophia slept on an air mattress, while the twins curled up together in the big bed with their mother. Marcus, Tommy, and Diego camped out in the living room, turning it into an adventure. As the children fell asleep, Elena found Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, staring at bills and trying to figure out how to stretch his construction worker salary to feed 7 people. "This is temporary," Elena said softly. "I'll find work, find us a place. I just need a few days." Marcus looked up at her tired face. "There's no rush. We'll figure it out together." "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking of Sarah, of all the times neighbors had helped them when she was sick, of the meals that appeared on their doorstep without explanation. "Because someone helped me when I needed it," he said simply. "And because those kids deserve better than sleeping in a car." Chapter 3, Building Something New. Days turned into weeks. Elena found a job at a local diner, working double shifts to save money for a deposit on an apartment. Marcus adjusted his work schedule to help with the children. Sophia proved to be remarkably responsible, helping with homework and keeping the younger kids in line. The twins slowly began to speak again, first to Tommy, then to Diego, and eventually to Marcus. They called him Tio Marcus, and their giggles filled the apartment with life he hadn't felt since Sarah died. But their peace was shattered when Luis Rodriguez appeared at the door one evening. Luis was everything Marcus disliked: expensive suit, cold eyes, and an attitude that suggested everyone around him was beneath his notice. Behind him stood two other men Marcus didn't recognize. "So this is where my brother's widow is hiding," Louise said, pushing past Marcus into the apartment. "Elena, come out here. We need to talk." Elena emerged from the kitchen, her face pale. The children immediately moved closer to her, and Marcus noticed Sophia positioning herself protectively in front of the twins. "What do you want, Louise?" Elena asked. "I want to make something clear," Louise said, his voice loud enough to carry to the neighbors. "You may have fooled this man into letting you stay here, but don't think this changes anything. You're still nothing. You're still the girl who trapped my brother into marriage by getting pregnant." "That's enough," Marcus said, stepping forward. Louise turned to him with a sneer. "And you must be the charity case. Tell me, how much is she paying you? Or are you getting your payment in other ways?" Marcus felt his fists clench, but Elena's hand on his arm stopped him. "Just leave, Louise," Elena said quietly. "You got what you wanted. You have the house." "The house was just the beginning," Louise said. "I've been doing some research on your new friend here. Did you know he's behind on his rent? Did you know he's one paycheck away from being evicted? How are you going to save anyone when you can't even save yourself?" Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He'd been struggling since Sarah's medical bills, but he'd managed to keep it together. Now, with 7 mouths to feed instead of 2, he was drowning. "I'm going to make you both an offer," Louise continued. "Elena, you take your children and disappear. Leave town. In exchange, I won't call your landlord and tell him about the overcrowding violation in this apartment. I won't report to social services that these children are living in substandard conditions with a man who can't provide for them." "You can't do that," Marcus said. "I'm a lawyer, friend. I can do whatever I want. And if you think I won't, you're wrong. I destroyed my own brother's family without blinking. What do you think I'll do to strangers?" Sophia spoke up then, her young voice cutting through the tension. "You didn't destroy us. You just showed us who our real family is." Louise laughed coldly. "Real family? This man isn't your family. He's a stranger who took you in because he feels sorry for you. How long do you think that sympathy will last when he can't pay his bills?" After Louise left, the apartment fell silent. The children went to bed without being asked, sensing the adults needed to talk. Marcus and Elena sat at the kitchen table, the weight of Louise's threats hanging between them. "He's right," Marcus said finally. "I am behind on rent. I've been managing but barely. With all of us here." "I should go," Elena said. "I should take the kids and leave before he makes trouble for you." "Where would you go?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. But I won't let him destroy your life too." Marcus looked around the apartment, at Tommy's drawings on the refrigerator mixed with pictures Sophia had drawn with the twins, at Diego's backpack next to Tommy's by the door, at the extra toothbrushes lined up in the bathroom. "This isn't just my life anymore," he said. "This is our life. All of us. And I'm not going to let that man scare us apart." The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead of going to the construction site, he went to the library and spent the day researching tenant rights, child welfare laws, and anything else he could find that might help them fight Louise's threats. Elena found him there when she got off her morning shift at the diner. "What are you doing?" she asked, sliding into the chair next to him. "Fighting back," Marcus said. "Louise thinks he can intimidate us because he's a lawyer and we're just working people. But he made some threats yesterday that might not be as legal as he thinks." Marcus had discovered that Louise's attempt to use overcrowding violations as a threat was shaky at best. The apartment was actually within legal limits for the number of occupants. More importantly, he'd found something else. "I did some digging on your husband's house," Marcus said carefully. "The one Louise took from you." Elena's face tightened. "What about it?" "Roberto bought that house 3 years before you got married, right? But you've been paying the mortgage for the last 5 years since he got sick. So in this state, that might give you a claim to the property. Louise used some legal trick to get you out quickly, but that doesn't mean it'll hold up if you fight it." Elena stared at him. "Fight it with what? I can't afford a lawyer, especially not one who could go up against Louise." Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "Who says we need a lawyer as good as Louise? We just need one who's willing to work for people like us." That afternoon, they walked into the office of Patricia Delgado, a family law attorney who worked out of a converted house near downtown. The waiting room was full of people who looked like them, working families, single parents, people who couldn't afford the fancy law firms uptown. Patricia listened to their story with the kind of attention that made it clear she'd heard similar tales before. She was in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that turned steel hard when Elena described Luis's threats. "This happens more than people realize," Patricia said when Elena finished. "Family members who think they can intimidate widows into giving up their rights. The good news is your husband's brother made some mistakes. The bad news is this could take months to sort out." "What kind of mistakes?" Marcus asked. "Well, for starters, threatening to call social services as retaliation is illegal. If he follows through, that could be considered harassment. Second, the way he forced you out of the house, changing locks while you were gone, giving you only an hour to collect belongings, that's an illegal eviction even if he does have ownership rights." Elena leaned forward. "Does that mean I can get the house back?" "It means you have grounds to fight. I won't lie to you, Luis Rodriguez has a reputation in this town. He's not a nice man and he has connections. But he's also overconfident, and overconfident lawyers make mistakes." Patricia agreed to take the case on a contingency basis. No payment unless they won. As they left her office, Elena seemed to stand a little taller. "I can't believe you did this," she said to Marcus as they walked to his truck. "I can't believe you're willing to fight for us." "We're fighting for each other," Marcus corrected. "That's what families do." While the legal battle slowly worked its way through the courts, life in the apartment settled into a new rhythm. Marcus and Elena developed a system. She worked mornings at the diner, he worked afternoons at the construction site, and together they managed to keep all 5 children fed, clothed, and in school. The kids adapted in the way children do, finding joy in small things. Tommy and Diego became inseparable, creating elaborate games that included the twins. Sophia blossomed under the responsibility of being the oldest, helping with homework and teaching the younger kids to cook simple meals. But it was the twins who provided what Marcus came to think of as daily miracles. Lucia, who had been silent for months after her father's death, began telling elaborate stories about a magical kingdom where dads never died and families never got separated. Carmen, equally quiet before, started singing old songs her father had taught her, mixed with new ones she made up about their strange new family. One evening, Marcus was helping Tommy with math homework when Carmen climbed into his lap. "Tio Marcus," she said seriously, "are you going to be our new daddy?" The question stopped all conversation in the room. Sophia looked up from where she was reading with Lucia. Diego paused his coloring. Elena froze in the kitchen doorway. Marcus looked down at Carmen's 5-year-old face, so serious and hopeful, and felt his heart crack open. "I can't replace your daddy," he said gently. "But I can promise you that as long as you need me, I'll be here." "Forever?" Lucia asked, abandoning her book to join her sister on Marcus's lap. "Forever," Marcus said and meant it. Elena wiped tears from her eyes, but she was smiling. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena and Marcus sat on the small balcony outside the kitchen, sharing a cup of coffee and watching the city lights. "You know what the strangest part is?" Elena said. "What?" "I'm happier now than I was in that big house. Even with all the uncertainty, even with Luis's threats hanging over us. Roberto was a good man, but his family made me feel like I was never good enough. Here with you and Tommy, I feel like I belong." Marcus understood. The apartment was crowded and money was tight, but it was full of laughter in a way his home hadn't been since Sarah died. The children had given him purpose beyond just surviving each day. "Sarah would have loved this chaos," he said, surprising himself by bringing up his wife. He rarely talked about her anymore, the grief still too sharp. "Tell me about her," Elena said softly. So Marcus did. He told Elena about Sarah's laugh, about how she could make friends with anyone, about how she'd always wanted a house full of children but cancer had stolen that dream along with everything else. "She sounds wonderful," Elena said. She was. And she would have told me to stop feeling guilty about being happy again. Elena took his hand. "You don't have to feel guilty. Love doesn't run out. There's always room for more." 3 months into the legal battle, Patricia called with news. Luis had made a critical error. He'd been using his position at his law firm to intimidate witnesses and had been caught trying to bribe a court clerk. "The state bar is opening an investigation," Patricia explained during a meeting in her office. "Luis is in serious trouble. More importantly for you, the judge is not happy about the way this case has been handled." But Luis wasn't going down without a fight. When legal intimidation failed, he tried a different approach. Marcus was walking home from work when a black sedan pulled up beside him. 2 men got out, not Luis but people who clearly worked for him. "Marcus Williams?" one of them said. "Yeah. Mr. Rodriguez wants to make you an offer. $10,000 cash. You convince the woman and her kids to leave town, and you get a fresh start somewhere else." Marcus looked at the envelope one of them held out. $10,000 would solve a lot of problems. It would pay his back rent, give him a cushion while he looked for better work, maybe even enough to move to a better apartment. What if I say no? The man smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Mr. Rodriguez really hopes you won't say no. He'd hate for anything to happen to your construction job. Hate for your landlord to get an anonymous tip about overcrowding. Hate for social services to get a call about kids living in unsuitable conditions. Marcus thought about Elena, about how hard she'd worked to build something stable for her children. He thought about Tommy, who had never been happier than he was with his new brothers and sisters. He thought about the twins who called him Tio and trusted him to keep them safe. Tell Luis Rodriguez he can take his money and choke on it, Marcus said. The men exchanged glances. That's your final answer? That's my final answer. As the sedan drove away, Marcus realized he wasn't afraid. For the first time since Sarah died, he had something worth fighting for. Luis's retaliation was swift and vicious. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work to find his boss waiting for him. Sorry, Marcus, Joe said, genuinely regretful. I got a call yesterday. Someone's making noise about safety violations on sites where you've worked. I can't afford an investigation right now. Marcus was fired on the spot. The same day, Elena got home from work to find their landlord at the door with an eviction notice. Someone had reported overcrowding and fire code violations. They had 30 days to remedy the situation or face eviction. That evening, the family gathered around the kitchen table for what felt like a war council. Even the youngest children understood that something serious was happening. What do we do? Sophia asked, her voice steady despite her worry. Marcus looked around the table at the faces depending on him. Elena's tired but determined expression, Tommy's confusion, Diego's quiet concern, the twins' wide eyes, Sophia's brave attempt to hold everything together. We stick together, he said. Whatever happens, we don't let him break us apart. But where will we go? Lucia asked. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. Patricia worked overtime trying to expedite their case, but the legal system moved slowly. Elena picked up extra shifts at the diner, working herself to exhaustion. Marcus spent his days applying for jobs and looking for apartments they couldn't afford. Then Tommy got sick. It started as a cold but quickly developed into pneumonia. The emergency room bill was staggering, and Tommy needed antibiotics they couldn't afford. Elena emptied her savings account. Marcus sold his truck and borrowed money from anyone who would lend it. Sitting in the hospital waiting room while Tommy slept, hooked up to machines that monitored his breathing, Marcus felt the weight of his failures crushing down on him. This is my fault, he told Elena. If I'd just taken Luis's money, you and the kids would be safe somewhere. Tommy wouldn't be sick. Elena took his hand. Tommy is sick because sometimes kids get sick. Not because of anything you did or didn't do. And we wouldn't be safe with Luis's money, we'd just be somewhere else, alone and scared. How can you be so sure? Because I know what alone feels like and I know what family feels like. This is family, Marcus. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Tommy recovered, but the medical bills and lost wages had wiped them out completely. They had 1 week left before the eviction deadline and nowhere to go. That's when the miracle happened. It started small, a knock on the door from Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who lived upstairs. She handed Elena an envelope with $500 cash. For the children, she said simply. I hear their Father in heaven calling them. Then came Mr. Okafor from down the hall, bringing groceries and $100 from his family. My wife, she says those children have good spirits. Good spirits should not suffer. By the end of the week, neighbors Marcus and Elena barely knew were contributing what they could. The single mother from apartment 3B brought homemade soup and $20. The young couple from across the hall offered their savings account, not much but everything they had. But the real miracle came from an unexpected source. Patricia called on Friday afternoon, her voice barely containing excitement. You need to come to my office right now. All of you. They arrived to find Patricia grinning like someone who just won the lottery. Luis Rodriguez has been disbarred, she announced. The state bar investigation found evidence of bribery, intimidation, and abuse of legal process. But more importantly for you, they also found evidence of fraud in how he obtained the house. Elena sat down heavily. What does that mean? It means the house is yours. Was always yours. Luis forged some documents and backdated others. Roberto had actually changed the deed to include your name 6 months before he died. Luis just hid the paperwork. Marcus felt the room spin. Are you saying? I'm saying you're going home, Patricia said. And Luis Rodriguez is going to jail. The house was bigger than Marcus remembered from the outside. As they stood in the driveway, keys in Elena's trembling hand, it seemed impossible that this beautiful home with its big front yard and two-car garage belonged to them. It's really ours? Carmen asked, bouncing on her toes. It's really ours, Elena confirmed. The first thing they did was walk through every room, the children claiming spaces and making plans. Sophia got her own room for the first time in months. The twins would share a room painted pink with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Tommy and Diego chose the room with built-in bunk beds. Marcus found himself in the master bedroom with Elena, both of them standing awkwardly in the doorway. This was Roberto's room, Elena said quietly. I know. I can sleep in the guest room or… No, Elena interrupted. Roberto is gone. I loved him and I always will. But he's gone and we're here. We're alive and we're a family. That evening they had their first family dinner in the big dining room. The table was too large for their mismatched chairs, and they had to eat off paper plates because all the good dishes were packed away, but it felt like the most elegant meal Marcus had ever had. After dinner, as the kids played in the backyard and Elena unpacked boxes, Marcus found himself standing in the kitchen, watching through the window. Tommy was teaching Diego to throw a football. Sophia was braiding flowers into the twins' hair. The sound of their laughter carried through the open window. Elena appeared beside him, following his gaze. What are you thinking about? She asked. I'm thinking about Sarah, Marcus said. About how she always wanted a big family, a house full of kids. I'm thinking about how life doesn't always give you what you want, but sometimes it gives you what you need. Elena slipped her hand into his. And what do you need? Marcus watched Tommy tackle Diego in a play fight while the twins cheered and Sophia laughed. He thought about the journey that had brought them all here. The loss, the fear, the kindness of strangers, the cruelty of those who should have protected them, and the love that had grown between people who had started as strangers. This, he said simply. I need this. 6 months later, Marcus and Elena were married in the backyard of their home. It was a small ceremony, just the children, Patricia, and a few neighbors who had become friends. Tommy was the ring bearer, Sophia was the maid of honor, and the twins scattered flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. But the real celebration came a week after the wedding, when the local newspaper ran a story about Luis Rodriguez's conviction. The article detailed his crimes and mentioned the family he had tried to destroy. By the end of the day, their phone was ringing with calls from other families Luis had victimized over the years. Patricia ended up with more clients than she could handle, all people who had been too afraid or too poor to fight back against Luis's intimidation. The law firm where Luis had worked was facing multiple lawsuits and a scandal that would eventually force them to close. But Marcus found that the sweetest revenge wasn't Luis's downfall, it was the life they had built in spite of him. Elena thrived in her new job as a school counselor, using her experience to help other families in crisis. Marcus started his own construction company, specializing in home repairs for elderly and low-income families. Sophia earned a scholarship to college. Tommy and Diego became local baseball stars. The twins started kindergarten speaking perfect English and Spanish, charming everyone they met. On quiet evenings, when the children were doing homework and the house was peaceful, Marcus and Elena would sit on the front porch and watch the neighborhood children play in the street. Often, neighbors would stop to chat, and their house became a gathering place for the community. Do you ever miss the apartment? Elena asked one evening as they watched Carmen and Lucia teach the neighbor kids a new game. Marcus considered the question. The apartment had been cramped and stressful, but it was also where they had become a family. I miss how simple everything felt, he said. When all we had to worry about was fitting everyone around that little kitchen table. We still fit around the table, Elena pointed out. It's just a bigger table now. She was right. No matter how much their circumstances had changed, the essential thing remained the same. They were a family that had chosen each other, fought for each other, and refused to let anyone tear them apart. 5 years after that rainy night when Elena and her children first knocked on Marcus's door, the Williams-Rodriguez household was exactly the kind of beautiful chaos Sarah would have loved. The refrigerator was covered with school photos, report cards, soccer schedules, and art projects. The living room furniture was sturdy and comfortable, chosen to withstand the daily adventures of 3 teenagers and 2 10-year-olds. The backyard contained a vegetable garden, a tree house, and a trampoline that attracted neighborhood kids like a magnet. Marcus coached Tommy and Diego's baseball team. Elena ran a support group for widowed parents. Sophia was studying to become a teacher. The twins had started a small business selling friendship bracelets to their classmates. Luis Rodriguez was serving a 5-year sentence for fraud and bribery. His law firm had collapsed, and most of his assets had been seized to pay restitution to his victims. The last Marcus had heard, Luis was working in the prison laundry and had been denied parole twice. But Marcus rarely thought about Luis anymore. His days were too full of better things: helping with homework, attending school plays, teaching kids to drive, planning family vacations, and falling asleep next to the woman who had become his heart. On the anniversary of that first rainy night, the family had a tradition of eating dinner by candlelight and sharing one thing they were grateful for. This year Carmen went first. "I'm grateful for Tio Marcus," she said, using the name she'd never stopped calling him even though he'd legally adopted all 4 children. "Because he taught me that family isn't about who you start with. It's about who you choose to keep." Lucia nodded seriously. "I'm grateful for our house because it's big enough for all of us and all our friends and sometimes the neighbor kids when they need somewhere to go." Diego, now 13 and suddenly taller than Sofia, was grateful for his new guitar and the lessons Marcus was paying for. Tommy was grateful for making varsity baseball as a freshman. Sofia, now 20 and home from college for the weekend, was grateful for parents who had taught her that love multiplies rather than divides. Elena was grateful for second chances and for learning that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you really need. When it was Marcus's turn, he looked around the table at the faces of his family, biological and chosen, planned and unexpected, bound together by love stronger than blood. "I'm grateful for daily miracles," he said. "For the kind of ordinary magic that happens when people choose to take care of each other." After dinner, as they cleaned up together in the comfortable chaos of a family kitchen, Marcus thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago, broken, barely surviving, convinced that the best parts of his life were behind him. He thought about Elena, frightened and desperate with nowhere to turn. About Sofia, carrying the weight of responsibility for her younger siblings. About Diego, Tommy, Carmen, and Lucia, just children who needed adults to make them feel safe. None of them had known, on that rainy night, that they were creating something beautiful. They had simply done the next right thing, and then the next, and then the next, until those small acts of kindness had built something larger than any of them could have imagined alone. As Marcus tucked the twins into bed, a privilege he never took for granted, Carmen asked the question she'd been asking for 5 years. "Tio Marcus, are you going to be our daddy forever and ever?" "Forever and ever," Marcus promised, the way he always did. "Even when we're grown up and have kids of our own?" "Especially then," Marcus said. "Because that's what daddies do. They love their children forever, no matter how old they get." Lucia nodded sleepily. "And when we have kids, they'll have the best grandpa in the whole world." As Marcus turned off the lights and closed their bedroom door, he smiled at the truth of it. Somewhere in the future were grandchildren he would spoil, family gatherings that would require multiple tables, and probably a few more strays who would need a place to belong. The daily miracle continued, one ordinary act of love at a time. And in a small apartment across town, a single mother with 2 children and nowhere to go was about to learn that sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, you're actually about to find the family you never knew you needed. The cycle of kindness would continue because that's what families do. They grow, they include, they make room for one more, and they teach their children that love is not a finite resource but an infinite one, expanding to fill whatever space is needed. In the end, that was Luis Rodriguez's greatest defeat, not his prison sentence or his ruined reputation, but the beautiful, chaotic, loving family that existed in spite of every attempt he'd made to destroy it. Love had won the way it always does when people are brave enough to choose it over fear. And that, Marcus thought as he kissed Elena goodnight and listened to the sounds of their children settling into sleep, was the greatest revenge of all.